Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are witnessing something that looked chemically impossible just a few years ago.
Right.
We're watching a big thaw.
In a relationship that has been in the absolute deep freeze for, what, nearly a decade now?
Exactly. We're talking about the UK and China. And we're unpacking Prime Minister Keir Starmer's massive, high-stakes trip to Beijing. And let's be honest, the timing, this is January 2026. It's everything.
It really is. To get the gravity of this, you just have to look at the calendar.
Yeah.
This is the first time a British Prime Minister has set foot in China for a bilateral visit in 8 years.
8 years.
In geopolitics, that's basically a geological era.
Yeah.
I mean, the last time this happened, the world looked like a completely different place.
Right. Back then, we were talking about a golden era of relations, weren't we?
We were. Cameron, Osborne, pints of beer with President Xi.
And then the Ice Age hit. Hong Kong, Huawei, human rights. The whole thing just froze over. So for Starmer to land in Beijing now, it feels less like a friendly visit and, I don't know, more like a high-wire act.
That is the perfect metaphor.
Yeah.
Because he isn't just walking a tightrope between two buildings. He's walking it in a hurricane.
Okay.
On one side, he's got a stagnant British economy that is, frankly, desperate for growth. On the other, he has the United States, specifically, a very watchful, very volatile Donald Trump.
Who is ready to cut the safety net.
Exactly, if the UK gets too cozy with Beijing.
We are definitely going to get to the Trump factor because I was reading about what happened with Canada recently,
Yeah.
and wow,
Oh, yeah.
that's a cautionary tale. But before we get to the looming disaster, let's look at the trip itself. Starmer lands. He goes to the Great Hall of the People. Set the scene for us. This isn't just a casual coffee chat.
Far from it. This is theater. The Great Hall of the People, it's designed to make you feel small.
Right.
It's massive, imposing, red carpets everywhere.
Right.
It's a Thursday in Beijing. Starmer sits down with President Xi Jinping. And here's the first interesting data point. The meeting lasted about 80 minutes.
80 minutes. That seems incredibly short for a reset of this magnitude.
It is.
I mean, Starmer spends longer than that in Prime Minister's questions. By the time you get through translation, that's what, 40 minutes of actual talking?
Yeah.
Was this actually substantive or just a drive-by handshake?
It's a bit of both, but you have to read the tea leaves of the language they used.
Okay.
In diplomacy, duration matters less than the specific phrases. Starmer went in very direct. He kept using the phrase concrete results
Concrete results.
and wanting to put the relationship on a solid footing. He wasn't there for philosophy. He was there for a transaction.
Solid footing. That sounds like code for let's stop arguing about ideology and start trading again.
Precisely. And Xi Jinping played his part perfectly. He acknowledged the ups and downs.
Which is a very polite way of saying you banned our tech companies.
Exactly. A polite euphemism. But he signaled he was ready for a long-term partnership. But here's the context I think gets missed. Xi needs this just as much as Starmer does.
Because the Chinese economy isn't the juggernaut it was 10 years ago, right? We've seen the reports on their property crisis, youth unemployment.
Exactly. The narrative is often that the West goes to China with a begging bowl, but right now, China's facing a massive capital flight. Foreign investors are pulling out.
So having a G7 leader show up.
A key U.S. ally show up and say, we want to do business. That is a massive propaganda win for Xi. It signals to the world that China is still investable.
So it's a marriage of convenience. Two struggling economies trying to help each other out, but Starmer didn't go alone. I was looking at the manifest for that delegation, and it was huge. Nearly 60 business leaders.
It was a full-on trade caravan. And look at who he brought. This wasn't just a random assortment of small businesses.
Yeah.
He brought the heavy artillery of the FTSE 100. We're talking the CEO of Jaguar Land Rover, the top brass from HSBC, the leadership of GSK.
That feels less like a diplomatic check-in and more like a desperate sales pitch. Please buy our cars, please use our banks.
It is a sales pitch. And it signals a profound shift in labor strategy. I mean, for years, the talk has been about de-risking, reducing dependency on China.
Right.
But you don't bring 60 of your biggest CEOs to Beijing if you're trying to de-risk. You do that if you're trying to recouple.
So the pressure is on.
Immense pressure to deliver economic growth. The UK numbers have been flatlining. And despite all the security warnings, China is still the world's second largest market. You just can't generate quick growth by ignoring it.
So Starmer is basically betting that he can separate the cash from the conflict.
Yeah.
Let's look at those concrete results he wanted. We have three main economic headlines: drugs, booze, and visas. Let's start with the biggest number, the pharma deal.
This is the headline figure. AstraZeneca announced a $1.5 billion investment commitment.
Okay, 1.5 billion sounds impressive, but let's dig into that. AstraZeneca is British-Swedish, but they've been in China for ages. Is this new money or just recycled profits?
It's a bit of a double down. This money is specifically earmarked for expanding drug manufacturing and research inside China through 2030, and Pascal Soriot, the CEO, was right there on the trip.
And the sector itself is significant.
Very. We're seeing the U.S. and Europe try to ban tech transfers to China in things like AI and semiconductors, but pharma is being carved out as a safe zone.
But is it safe? I mean, we just saw the U.S. pass the Biosecure Act, trying to cut ties with Chinese biotech. Isn't the U.K. swimming upstream here?
That is the risk.
If AstraZeneca builds huge research hubs in China, aren't they risking their access to the U.S. market later on?
It's a massive gamble. The UK is betting that saving lives, cancer drugs, cardiovascular research, will stay exempt from the geopolitical trade war. So Red is basically saying we are a global company and we aren't picking sides.
But in 2026, not picking a side is becoming a very dangerous stance. Right. So that's the science gamble. Now let's talk about the retail win. Deal number 2. The UK's favorite liquid asset, Scotch whiskey.
You can't have a British trade mission without mentioning whiskey or salmon. It's practically a law.
It really is. But looking at the numbers, this actually seems like a legit concession from Beijing. They slashed the tariffs in half, from 10% to 5%.
They did. And on the surface, it's great news. Starmer's team immediately put out a press release saying this will save UK exporters about $250 million over the next 5 years.
Okay, I want to pause on that number. $250 million over 5 years, that's $50 million a year.
Right.
In the context of a trillion-pound economy, isn't that essentially a rounding error? Are we overhyping this?
Economically, yes, it's peanuts. It is a drop in the ocean.
Okay.
But politically, it's gold. This is what we call a retail win. It's something Starmer can explain to a voter in Scotland.
Right, to a worker in a distillery. It's tangible.
I went to China, and I made it cheaper to sell our stuff. It's much harder to explain a complex pharmaceutical supply chain deal. Whiskey is easy.
It's the spoonful of sugar to help the diplomacy go down. And it also feels like a classic Chinese negotiation tactic.
Oh, absolutely.
Give a concession on something low stakes like liquor to avoid giving ground on the hard stuff like electric vehicles or data security.
Exactly. It costs China very little to lower tariffs on premium scotch. It keeps the UK happy without threatening any domestic Chinese industries. A very calculated gift.
Which brings us to the third gift, tourism. The new visa rule. British citizens can now travel to China visa-free for stays less than 30 days.
Yeah.
Now, I remember the old process. It was a nightmare. Invitation letters, detailed itineraries, you had to surrender your passport for weeks. This just wipes that away.
For short trips, yes. It makes doing business or just visiting significantly easier.
But before we throw a parade, I looked into this, and it turns out we aren't exactly special, are we? This feels like we're just getting what everyone else already had.
You nailed it. This is a participation trophy, not a gold medal.
No.
The UK is joining a list of about 50 other countries that already have this. France, Germany, Australia. They've had this access for a while now.
So while the UK was in the deep freeze, our European neighbors were already enjoying visa-free travel.
Exactly. So Starmer presents this as a win, but really it's just China leveling the playing field. It's normalization.
So they're letting us back in the club, but not making us the VIP.
Not at all. They also agreed to study a future bilateral services agreement, but, don't hold your breath on that.
Diplomatic speak for, we'll form a committee and ignore it for 3 years.
Precisely.
Right. So those are the economic pillars: drugs, drink, and travel. A standard trade mission package. But then there was this other announcement that totally caught me off guard. It wasn't about trade at all. It was about migration. Specifically, the small boats crisis in the English Channel.
This was the pivot. And honestly, this is the most fascinating part of the trip from a strategic perspective.
Because at first glance you think, what on earth does Beijing have to do with dinghies crossing from France to Dover?
Right.
But it's about the hardware, isn't it?
It's the engines. The intelligence agencies have known this for a while. The outboard motors pushing those boats across the channel, they're not from Europe.
No.
They are cheap, mass-produced engines made in China, shipped to Turkey or Eastern Europe, and then moved into criminal networks in France.
So Starmer is trying to go upstream, cut the supply at the factory floor.
Exactly. The agreement they announced is for intelligence sharing and a crackdown on this specific supply chain.
But how does that actually work in practice? I mean, these are basically lawnmower engines. They're dual use. You can use them for a fishing boat or a smuggler's dinghy. How do you police that?
That is the million-dollar question. And that's why this is such a concession from China. Policing this requires the Chinese state to actively monitor and restrict its own manufacturers.
To check who's buying them, where they're shipping them.
Things China rarely does for foreign powers unless there's a huge quid pro quo.
So why would Xi agree to do it? Why help Starmer solve his biggest domestic headache?
Because it costs Xi nothing to say yes, and it buys him massive goodwill. The small boats issue is toxic for the Labor government. If Starmer can come home and say, my relationship with Beijing is helping secure our borders, that justifies the whole trip.
It gives him the political cover he needs to do the economic deals.
She knows this. He's giving Starmer a political lifeline.
It's incredibly cynical, but smart. I'll help you with your boat problem. You keep your market open to our goods.
Right.
And here is the giant flashing red warning light on the dashboard. While Starmer is shaking hands in Beijing, he might be creating a much bigger crisis across the Atlantic.
The Trump factor.
Yeah.
You simply cannot analyze this trip without looking at the United States.
We have to talk about the Canada precedent. Because for anyone thinking, oh, the U.S. won't mind, we just saw this movie play out.
We did, and you really need to understand the details here because the parallels are terrifying for the UK.
So what happened?
Just recently, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney attempted a very similar pivot. Canada's economy was struggling, so Carney went to Beijing to boost trade.
And the reaction from Donald Trump was instantaneous?
It was nuclear. He didn't just send a mean tweet, he threatened to impose a 100% tariff on Canadian goods.
100%.
100%. He explicitly linked it to Canada's betrayal by pursuing closer ties with China.
And the market reaction was brutal, I imagine.
The Canadian dollar tanked, investment froze, it was economic shock and awe. And that is the Carney precedent. Trump has established a new doctrine. You cannot be part of the American and Chinese economic spheres at the same time. You have to pick.
So Starmer lands in Beijing, signs a deal for $1.5 billion with AstraZeneca, cuts tariffs on whiskey. Is he essentially painting a target on the UK's back?
That is the risk. Starmer is betting that the special relationship protects him.
That Trump will cut him some slack he didn't give Canada.
But that is a massive gamble. Trump's foreign policy is transactional. If he sees the UK pivoting toward his primary rival, he has shown he won't hesitate to use economic weapons, even against allies.
And let's not forget, the UK is even more vulnerable than Canada in some ways. We are desperate for a US trade deal.
Or at least trade stability.
If Trump slaps a 10 or 20% tariff on British goods, that $250 million we saved on whiskey evaporates in an afternoon.
Completely. And the opposition back home knows this. Kemi Badenoch, the conservative leader, came out swinging. She said she would have rejected the visit entirely.
Rejected it, no trip, no talks.
Zero. Her argument is that security trumps economics. She views China primarily as a systemic threat, cyber attacks, espionage, support for Russia.
So for her, asking for investment is like inviting the burglar into your house because he offered to fix the window.
A perfect way to put it. She thinks Starmer is trading long-term security for short-term cash.
And it's not just security, it's values. Whenever a Western leader goes to China, we have to talk about human rights. Specifically, Jimmy Lai. A British citizen, a pro-democracy media mogul, rotting in a Hong Kong jail. Did Starmer actually do anything for him?
Starmer claims he raised the issue. When the press pushed him, he said he had a respectful discussion about it.
It's respectful discussion.
Yeah.
God, I hate that phrase. It's the ultimate diplomatic cop-out.
It is.
It means I mentioned it so I wouldn't get yelled at back home, but I didn't push hard enough to ruin the vibe.
That's exactly what it means. It signals to the Chinese, I have to say this for my domestic audience, but don't worry, I won't let it stop the AstraZeneca deal. The priority was 90% trade, 10% human rights, a cold calculation.
So let's synthesize all this. Starmer comes back to London. He's got a briefcase full of promises, big pharma investment, cheaper whiskey, easier travel, a pledge on boot engines. But the cost is potentially blowing up the relationship with the U.S.
Just as things are getting dangerous globally. And dangerous is the right word. Look at the other headline we pulled for this deep dive. It was right next to the Starmer news. Trump warns Iran that time is running out as the U.S. naval fleet approaches.
That is a chilling bit of context.
It reminds us the world isn't static. We are on a near-war footing in multiple regions. U.S. fleets moving in the Middle East, a trade war brewing in North America. And here's the UK, trying to play both
It
sides.
feels like cakeism all over again.
It does.
We want American security guarantees, but we want Chinese market access.
But the bakery is closing. Starmer is trying to return to a pre-2016 world where that was possible. But the world has changed. The U.S. isn't just asking for alliance, they're demanding total economic loyalty.
And China isn't just a market anymore.
It's a strategic rival that supplies Russia and threatens Taiwan.
So the UK is a small boat in very stormy seas, to borrow the metaphor. The big thaw with China might feel good for the Treasury right now. That whiskey money is real.
But if it triggers a tariff wall from the United States, the math stops working instantly. We're entering an era of transactional diplomacy. Values are taking a backseat to, well, monetary value. Starmer has made his bet.
He thinks he can handle the dragon and the lion at the same time.
Without getting burned or bitten?
But lions bite and dragons breathe fire, and sometimes they both attack at once.
Exactly.
So here's the thought I want to leave you with today. We've looked at the deals, the engines, the threats. But think about this. In a world where our closest historic allies are threatening us with tariffs, and our systemic rivals are the only ones offering to invest billions in our future, is economic neutrality actually possible anymore? Or did the UK just pick a side without realizing it, simply by chasing the money?
That is the question that will define the next decade of British history.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll be watching closely to see if that whiskey actually gets cheaper or if the geopolitical bill comes due. See you next time.